punch that start streaming button. Everything should be good to go, and I should be good to talk. So let's get into it. Hi, folks. I'm Fritz. I mostly make Historic Brawl content. Today I'm just going to be looking at the new cards in Historic Brawl, not Historic Brawl Alchemy. That's not a real set. I'll be looking at the new cards in the Brothers War Alchemy set that just came out. I'll be looking at these mostly from the perspective of how useful these are in Historic Brawl, or how interesting they are in Historic Brawl. Useful is probably the wrong perspective. I am more interested if things are fun and exciting than if they are particularly good. I make a bunch of Historic Brawl content. You can see it on my channel, blah, 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 blah. Let's just look at these cards. So I don't want this to be too much of a bait. So we're going to start by looking at the new commanders, and then we're going to look at everyone else. I've looked at these a little bit because I did have to make the thumbnail, but I haven't seen the rest of the set at all. Rich Lao, Headmaster. 2/4, beginning of your end step, you may pay 1 colorless mana. When you do, target artifact card in your graveyard perpetually gains. This spell costs 1 less to cast. If it's a creature or vehicle card, it perpetually gains +2/+2. Put into your library second from the top. This is pretty good. This is, at least will enable some weird decks. Is it a better artifact commander than, say, Emery? Probably not. But I think that you can probably do some fun stuff with this. What would be really monstrous to... So it's artifact recovery, beginning of your end step. You're in blue-white, so you can probably protect it a fair amount. Putting that on something like Sundering Titan would be pretty bad. Putting it onto the X cost, the 0-costed trample that is protection from multicolored would also be neat. I think this will... You can make some fun decks with this. This seems pretty decent, is my first reading on it. Is there anything that this absolutely breaks? There must be, right? If you make an artifact cost 0, there's got to be something that just absolutely shatters. Probably an argument for... This will be very annoying, actually, if you don't have Artifact Exile and you just try to do a Paradox Engine setup with this. Paradox Engine that you just keep getting back. But you put into your library second from the top. Copying triggered effects would also be cool. Ornithopter, actually. This buffs Ornithopter a little bit. I think this is decent. I think this is pretty decent. I think it'll be fun. I don't know that it's a better artifact commander than some of the stuff we already have. And unfortunately, it does not combo with my favorite artifact interaction commander, which is Rizug, because Rizug is mono black. But let's keep on going. Radic, Tal Zealot, 2 colorless, 1 white, 1 black. Hexproof from white, hexproof from black. Whenever 1 or more knights you control attack, draft a card from Radic, Tal Zealot's spellbook. What's he got in his spellbook? So it's a bunch of stuff. Let's just go through these. Midnight Reaper. That's good. Guardian of Faith. Decent. Knight of the Ebon Legion. Very good. Cavalier of Dawn. Very good. Benalish Marshal. Mixed feelings on this one. It's not a bad card, but the 3 white mana can be a little expensive. Cavalier of Night. Very good. Murderous Rider. Very good. Order of Midnight. Pretty good. Acclaimed Contender. It's fine. Dauntless Bodyguard. Very good. Valiant Knight. Tribal. That's decent. That's decent. Smitten Swordmaster. That's okay. Blacklands Paragon. Pretty good. History of Benalia. Pretty good. What the hell? Okay, none of these are... Okay. Hexproof from white, hexproof from black. That's going to be very interesting. That's protection from a lot of hardish removal. Basically every card you can draft with him is good. The only downside is you can only get 1 card with him per turn. That said, previously commanders that have given you like drafting cards, I'm specifically thinking of Slimefoot, just because I had a Slimefoot deck that was surprisingly good. Like it won an event, surprisingly good. Slimefoot was very good. This does not seem quite as powerful with Slimefoot because you can't get quite as many cards, but anything that's given you card advantage has been pretty decent in the past. And he can do his effect the turn you drop him. If you drop him and then go to combat, you've already played a knight. And virtually every card you pull from his pool is pretty decent. Especially, you've got like 3 pieces of hard removal in here. Cavalier of Dawn, Cavalier of Night, Murderous Rider. Do we have anything else? I'd say there's like 2 whiffs, but everything else in here is decent. Especially if you're doing Night Tribal. So, again, this seems very good. Risko Clockmaker. Risko Clockmaker enters the battlefield. Conjure a card named Midnight Clock onto the battlefield. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put an hour counter on each permanent you control named Midnight Clock. Each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Okay. This guy could be great. I'm not sure that he is great. But a card that just gives you a Midnight Clock each time you play him. Midnight Clock is very good. That said, as cool as he is, I had a concern with this. How should I word this? I don't have a good read on whether or not getting a Midnight Clock as a 4-drop, potentially every time, is going to be good enough. Black and blue are 2 very good control colors and can do a good job of refilling their hand. And Midnight Clock, oh, you know what? It doesn't conjure it tapped. That's pretty good. The downside is that he's a 4-drop. Each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. I am going to say he's not exciting to me. He is interesting, but he's not exciting. There's probably a effective control list with him because Midnight Clock just letting you refill your hand and then being able to hit that every time is pretty good. And presumably he's going to come out on turn 3, right? If you have a good opening hand, turn 1, turn 2, Arcane, or another 2-drop, turn 3, you play your 4th, 3rd land, and play him for 4. He's quite good. He creates a mana sink and generates 2 threats each time he comes out on his own whenever you cast a non-creature spell. So that's going to be artifacts as well. He doesn't fill me with excitement, but I think he's good. He doesn't seem like a dud. Honestly, none of these really seem like duds, but... Perseus, Titan of Waves. At the beginning of your end step, you may discard a card. If you do, create a treasure token and choose Ambitious or Expedient. If you choose Ambitious, seek a card with greater mana value than the discard's card. If you choose Expedient, seek a card with lesser mana value than the discarded card. There is probably a weird combo deck of some sort here that I can't see off the top of my head, based on discarding cards with higher and higher mana costs to guarantee get something out of your deck. Alternately, you just generate treasure token generation in black-red. Yeah, that's pretty good. Can I think of a way to break this? Not really. He's good. He doesn't have haste. He doesn't do anything immediately when he enters, but he does at the end of the turn. He lets you he lets you toss cards to get cards of like better different mana values. Who are we comparing him to? I'm gonna need to... This is dumb, but I actually need to pull up my tiny list. I have a... So we're comparing him to the other... Probably the other treasure generation commanders, right? Stream assets. Is he better than... Magda. Who's the black-red treasure generation card? I made decks with it. The downside to making so many decks is that sometimes you just forget the name of cards when you really shouldn't. Stream assets, TG Brawl cards. I know who I'm thinking of. It's the black-red chain dude from, not the last Alchemy set, but from Baldur's Gate, which I guess technically is an Alchemy set. I am thinking of Prosper, Tomebound. There we go. Is he better than Prosper? Exile top card of your library. Prosper doesn't require you to discard a card. He just gives you a card off the top, and he gives you more treasure tokens from exile. So I feel like he's sort of competing in that slot for Prosper, but I don't think he's better than Prosper. That said, I can see him still slotting into Prosper. He's still a good card. I'm not sure he's as good of a red-black treasure commander as Prosper is. And finally, the last one, whose text I haven't read. Jarsoul Dark Age Scion. 1 colorless, 1 red, 1 green. Starting intensity 1. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may cast a spell with mana value equal to Jarsil Dark Age Scion's intensity from the graveyard without paying its mana cost. If you do, perpetually increase Jarsil's intensity by 1. Okay. Interesting. Possibly really annoying. Is there a way that this gets broken really easily? I don't think so. Here's why. Okay. So intensity is a perpetual effect. And as I think like most folks know, or if you don't know, perpetual effects, you can reset them when your commander goes back to the command zone. But the thing is, well, you cast it from your graveyard. It's not exiled when you cast it. You do it at the beginning of combat. I can't think of any way that you would, like, I can't think of any spells that are, like, 1 or 2 drops that would absolutely break the game. Like, it's not like Channel is available. Being able to recast stuff from your graveyard is always good, though. Maybe I'm not thinking big enough. The other issue is that, like, the really cursed spells, you'd have to get his intensity quite high, or ignoring that. Let's see, Human Wizard. Is there anything in that archetype we can do? Sorry, my nose is very itchy. I'm going to have to just... Sorry about that. Is there anything broken we can do with the fact that you're a Human Wizard? Not that I can think of. The fact that he's in red-green, right, is kind of the limiting factor here. Like, it's not that there are no good spells in red-green. It's just that red-green doesn't have, like, Time Warp or something incredibly cursed. So as a commander, I'm not sure that he does as much. As a legendary creature, maybe this slots into the current Joda list, or it might also go into Goshintai as a form of graveyard recovery. Oh, but no, it doesn't quite work, does it? Because you have to cast... I don't think this is... As a commander, I'm leaning towards this is not an incredible card. As a slot into other decks, there's probably something good with him that you can do with him. But I think the issue is that you only get 1 spell of each mana cost, right? So you get a 1-drop, then a 2-drop, then a 3-drop, then a 4-drop, then a 5-drop. And finding that is difficult. And those cards have to already be in your graveyard. And then you have to have them be something good that you actually want to do this a second time with. And if he's not your commander, there's no way to reset him. So once you get up to like 7 or 8, it's very difficult. It's very difficult, and it's kind of a pain in the butt. I don't love this guy. Watch me be wrong. Watch me turn out to be the tier 1 commander in like 2 weeks, but maybe I'm just thinking about him wrong. Like, maybe you don't use him as, like, maybe the right way to use him is to just recast a bunch of small stuff. So you're recasting Lightning Bolt, you're recasting Cultivate, you're recasting... What's a 2-drop card that red and green like? I'm sure it exists. That might be better. So maybe he's a fairly powerful, like, recursive graveyard commander and something sort of aggro, and that could be the case. But if I had to try to make a loose guess about power level and rank all of these, just off the top of my head, 1 to 5, 1 being the most powerful, 5 being the weakest, I would put Risco at 1. Now I'm saying what I said about Jarsil. Now I'm rethinking it. Risco at 1. Radic at 2. Jarsil at 3. Richelieu at 4. Crucius at 5. The problem is, like, comparing all of them is a little bit difficult. I don't think Crucius is a better commander than Prosper in terms of the whole treasure archetype. So I'm a little bit hesitant to commit to calling him very good. The other thing with Richelieu is that I'm sure that there's something interesting or broken you can do with that, even if it's just making some artifacts cheap. But In terms of cards that I'm looking at, I'm like, okay, they seem pretty decent. Radic, Rusko, and Jarsil. Jarsil, you can, I guess, now that I'm saying this, I don't think you use him to cast big spells. I think you use him to just do red-green aggro, and then you just use him to pull stuff out of your graveyard, so that if your opponent is burning it or using single target removal on your elves, you just go and get them back. Rusko is probably the most straightforward of all of these. There's probably a very powerful control list there. I don't know if he's good enough to support it off the top of my head, because I don't have a good sense of reading that. But the fact that he comes out and that he is both going to give you a midnight clock, which your opponent doesn't want you to keep, and he's going to give you the whole, each time you cast a spell, each opponent loses 1 life, you gain 1 life. He seems decent enough. Radic, I don't know enough about Knights as an archetype right now. Radic could turn out to be very good, though, if that's an easy condition to make, just because all of his cards seem very, very good. And anything generate cards advantage. Richelieu is going to need somebody... It's going to need more time for me to think about it. Okay, that's the commanders. Let's go look at the rest of the set. So if you don't give a shit about my opinions about anything that isn't a commander, you can leave now. Norn's Disassembly. Sacrifice a historic permanent, seek a card. Spoilers, by the way. That seems good. Artifacts, legendaries, and sagas are historic. Yeah, so spend 2, sack a blood token, get a card is good. Seek a historic card. So it's going to only get you artifacts, legendaries, and sagas. That still seems decent. And probably gets in Tawnos Endures. Exile target creature. It begins at the beginning of your upkeep. If this card is exiled, it perpetually gains +1/+1, then you may put it onto the battlefield. Yes, very good. Absolutely will be played. By Elspeth's command, beginning of your combat, choose one that wasn't chosen in your last combat. 1 soldier gets +1/+1. Choose a soldier card in your hand. It perpetually gains +1/+1 in vigilance. Create a 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature token. I like this. I like this. Is it good enough to be played? I have not. So here's the thing. I think the soldier tribal deck that currently exists is Harbin. I have not made a Harbin deck yet. I've seen some people post about it, but I haven't made that deck. I don't know if this is good enough to include into Harbin off the top of my head. I personally like this card, but that's because I like things that do perpetual effects. Patchplate Resolute. When it ETBs or leaves, you get a boon with when you cast your next creature spell. That creature enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. Unearths for 2. So that is 4 +1/+1 counters total in exchange for 3 mana and then 2 more mana. This seems good. Does it belong in Historic Brawl? I mean, again, soldier deck, right? Probably goes in soldier archetype, or it goes into white rushdown. It might be a little expensive for white rushdown for Adeline, but it's not terrible. The fact that it has Unearth is actually probably kind of decent. And it's a 3/3. It's a 3/3 for 2 when it unearths. Piece it together. Starting intensity 1. Draw a card. If piece it together's intensity is 4, instead take an extra turn after this one. Perpetually increase piece it together's intensity and the intensity of card named piece it together in your graveyard, hand, and library by 1. Oh boy. Oh boy. That is... Okay, in Historic Brawl, I really hope this doesn't become a thing that gets used. But this is not... It's a 1-drop, draw 1 cantrip. So it probably goes into blue recursing decks. Perpetually increase... It is fine. It's a very slow opt. Will it get used? I don't think it's like a staple by any means. I don't think it's even like an auto-include. There's probably decks that would be happy to include this, just because it replaces itself. But I don't know what those decks are. Hercule's Prodigy. When it ETBs, create a tapped Power Stone. When it attacks, you may pay 3. If you do, it can't be blocked and gets +2/+0. Perfectly reasonable card. I don't know what it might have a place in blue, in cards that are in like artifact decks that also have blue. But this feels more like a mid-range bomb for drafts than it does like a historic Brawl card. Warzone Duplicator. When it ETBs, return target creature an opponent controls power less than Warzone Duplicator to its owner's hand. If that creature wasn't a token, conjure a duplicate of into your hand. It gains, you may spend mana if it's any color. It doesn't have flash. You can cast it for 4 as a 3/3. That's pretty decent. It gives you card advantage. But it's not instant speed. I think it's cool. I'm not sure that it is amazing. I want to check one thing real quick. Alright, so I gotta go through the rest of these kind of fast because I need to go running. Gixian Recycler dies or is put into your graveyard from your hand or library. Conjure a card named Gixian Recycler into your graveyard. Okay, 1 second. If it gains, exile it. If it would leave the battlefield, dies or is put in your graveyard from your hand or library. It's a 3/1 for 2. So we already have that in Ashnod's Recycler, I think. And that's been used a little bit. This is just a Ashnod's Recycler hits the graveyard though, like it exiles stuff from the graveyard, so it has more utility. But this is equivalently statted with a different ability. When it dies, conjure a card named it into your graveyard. Actually, so it dies, it conjures a copy into your graveyard, and then you get, for 4 mana, you get 2 more, like you can play them both. And if you care about graveyard, that's also good. If it's put into your graveyard from pretty much anywhere, it does a copy. Maybe in self-mill decks. Maybe in self-mill decks that are also going to want to actually play stuff out of the graveyard. I think it's decent. Lonely End. Target creature gets -3/-3. Remove 3 loyalty counters from target planeswalker. If you weren't the starting player, you gain 2 life. Instant speed. So another piece of cheap removal. Probably perfectly fine. Maybe a decent answer to Liliana and certain other planeswalker commanders. Not incredible though. I think it's fine. I don't think it's perfect. I'm not excited by it, but it's probably useful. Pendragon Besieged. At the beginning of your end step, choose creature with the least toughness among creatures your opponents control. Perpetually gets -1/-1. When your opponents control no creatures, sacrifice Pendragon Besieged. Yeah, this seems decent. This seems very good, especially into... This seems very good if it going into Kinnan, actually. Into Kinnan lists. Because it's... Ooh. Oh, I like this. I really like this. I don't know that this necessarily has a place in every deck, but as a tech card for certain matchups, I like this. Forgefire Automaton. At the beginning of your upkeep, return target creature with power less than Forgefire Automaton's power from your graveyard to the battlefield. Its base power perpetually becomes equal to Forgefire Automaton's power. What the Okay. This is very good. It is mono black, right? So this can go into any black deck. This feels like a very good Reanimator card. I think the important part here is that it's power less than Forgefire Automaton. Oh, so I get it. That's a fun trick. So the trick is that is supposed to be that you can't really hit something more than once with Forgefire Automaton. But this still seems like a decent Reanimator. And if you pump it, it can hit something even bigger. And at the beginning of your upkeep. So untap, upkeep. So you can cast something in response to this being there. I'm assuming it checks based on the stack. No, so it's return target. So the ability goes on the stack. You have to pick a target. So you'd have to cast something before this ability goes on the stack. Somebody smarter than me will figure that out. I think this is pretty decent. It does have to survive a turn to do anything. But the fact that it has a... So here's the thing that I've found with prototype costs is that it's almost better to look at the card by looking at its prototype, and then you assume that its non-prototyped version is like the expensive, cool version. Especially in like white black or black blue, anything that bounces this and returns it to the battlefield, you can drop this on turn 3. I think this is quite good. Melt through, 2 damage to any creature. If it's a creature, melt through deals 2 damage to any target. Yes. If it's a creature, it perpetually gains. As long as this creature is on the battlefield, damage isn't removed from it during cleanup steps. Yeah, this will be played. It's a parallel shock. It's not lightning bolt, it's a parallel shock. It's perfectly useful, and it probably makes certain commanders a little bit more squishy. But given that it's just an extra shock, this will be played, I'd assume. Atomical Phoenix. Flying Haste. When it dies, perpetually gets +2/+2. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may play X in a red, where X is Atomical Phoenix's power. If you do, return it to your graveyard. Return it from your graveyard to the battlefield. Yeah, return it to the graveyard from your battlefield would not be a good effect. I like this. Legia Antiquitarian. When it ETBs, conjure a duplicate of another target non-token creature or artifact you control into your graveyard. The duplicate gains Unearth. 1 colorless, 1 red. Interesting. Non-token creature or artifact. So, this might be a stupid question, but if I have Faligi Antiquarian, can I just, okay, so this is not Historic Brawl, but can I just combo like 2 of these together to get like an unlimited supply of these in my graveyard? It's like I play the first one, target one in my graveyard. No, I play the first one, sorry, I have to play the first one, target one on the board, 1 goes into the graveyard. Okay. Maybe that doesn't work as easily as I thought it did. Never mind. Disregard my ramblings. Will this be played in Historic Brawl? It gives some form of card advantage, so probably yes. It's a little expensive at 4, though. Atomical Phoenix is fun enough to be played just because it's a mana sink, I think. Chaos Kindling. When it ETBs, deals 2 damage to any target. At the beginning of your upkeep, draft a card from Chaos Kindling spellbook and exile it until end of turn. You may cast that card. What do we got in the spellbook? It's a 5-drop. Anything that gives you cards is usually kind of good. But what's our spellbook? Seasoned Pyromancer, Lightning Bolt, Terror of the Peaks, Abrade, Young Pyromancer, Explosive Singularity, Unexpected One, False Siege Gain Commander, Electro Dominance. Crackle with Power, Cleansing Wildfire, Volcanic Fallout, Banefire, Dualcaster Mage. And Gutter Snipe. This is fine. I don't think it's... The fact that it's a 5-drop feels a little expensive, but it's very good. I don't know how to rate it on that scale, basically. In Historic Brawl, it fills that weird slot that goes along with all of those other like red or red-blue enchantments that are like copy certain spells or exile spells from your graveyard and copy them. It feels like it slots into that sort of design path, and those go into some decks, but I don't ever really consider them amazing. It deals 2 damage to any target. That part... So it's a shock and then 4 more mana for, like, cards. At the beginning of your upkeep, you draft. I don't know what deck it gets played in. It probably gets played because it generates card advantage. But I don't personally love it. Sylvan Smite. Put a 1/1 on target creature you control. Then that, if you were the starting player, then that creature deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. Important to note, this is not a fight spell. It is instant speed. It is perfectly decent. It looks like this is part of a cycle with Lonely End and presumably some of the other stuff we've seen. It will probably be played. The question is it an upgrade over any of the fight spells that we currently have? And if the answer for any of that is yes, then it'll be a replacement for those fight spells. Foundry Groundbreaker. When it ETBs, sack a land, then conjure 2 cards named Mishra's Foundry onto the battlefield tapped. That's pretty good. Right? Yeah. I think that's pretty good. That's land ramp. It's ramp without forcing you to pull it out of your deck. It sacks into the ground. So it actually has some synergy with cards that like to be sacking lands. Titania actually... Weirdly enough, Titania, I think, actually works really well with this card. Even though Titania is theoretically like, no, save the land. It's green, so it can go into any of the frog lists that like sacking land. I like it. Creatures you control of trample. Whenever one or more non-token artifacts enter the battlefield under your control, creatures you control perpetually get +1/+1. This is the sort of card that I like. That doesn't mean it's good, but I do like it. Is it good enough? What would it be included in? Non-token artifacts. So you're going to be already playing a artifact list, an artifact creature list in green. Is there an artifact creature list in green? Yes. Well, not really. Tawnos makes tokens, right? I don't know what it slots into. I think it's fine. Argothian Uprooting. Alright, 1 second. My nose is just absolutely killing me. Put 2/+1 counters on each of X target lands you control. They become 0/0 elemental creature with reach haste, and when this creature leaves the battlefield, conjure a card named Forest onto the battlefield tapped. They're still lands. Oh god. This seems really cursed. Here's why. Note that this doesn't say they perpetually become 0/0 elemental creatures with reach and haste. So if you put this in blue-green, flicker those creatures, they leave the battlefield, a forest gets conjured tapped, and then you just get your lands back. I think this is really good. I think there's probably something really obnoxious you can do with it. I think it'll be played. Argavian Welcome. Store up to 1 target creature with power 4 or greater. Choose an on-land card in your hand. It perpetually gains flash. Perfectly decent. Probably a little cursed. Does it replace anything in like a blue-white list? My issue is that I don't know what this replaces. Like, it's... If it doesn't replace anything, I'm not sure that it's powerful enough to be played. Alright, we've already covered most of these. Let's go to Yoshi and Courier. When it attacks, choose one that wasn't chosen during your last combat. Seek an artifact card with mana value equal to the number of power stones you control. Create a tapped power stone token. Do we have a... Who's the red-blue... Ah, okay, so there is a red-blue artifact commander, and that would be Joria. But the real question is, does this actually have a slot in Joria? I don't think it does. Like, this is a perfectly fine card, but I don't know that this actually has a slot in Joria. It might, because it's just going to be pulling cards out of your deck, but Joria is mostly just, hey, I'm going to play Paradox Engine, and then my opponent never gets to play a card ever again. Great Desert Hellion, starting intensity 1. Hey, more intensity. Menace. At the beginning of your upkeep, sack it unless you discard a card. If you discard the card, perpetually increase its intensity by 1. When it leaves the battlefield, you may discard your hand. If you do, draw cards equal to Great Desert Hellion's intensity. So, a 5/5 with Menace for 3. There's enough black and red decks that are fine with discarding cards. And it's when it leaves the battlefield, right? So, and it's beginning of your upkeep. I think this is highly statted enough that it will get played. It will get played in the list where... What's that black-red list? It's also a Hellion. It's the Companion Hellion that doubles damage from odd sources. I think this has a slot in that list. I think that discarding 1 or 2 cards and then getting the ability to do stuff with your hand later is fine. It's a little bit risky. I'm not gonna lie, but I think this probably has a slot in there. Because its starting intensity is 1, which means it's going to get you a minimum of 1 card if you want to use the effect. And probably 2. Because your opponent will probably have to wait 1 turn before they want to actually blow it up if they can do it at instant speed. Assemble the team. Search the top 30 of your library for rounded up for a card. Put that card into your hand, then shuffle. Who's the person with is that Glissa? Glissa, Kea, the Wandering Emperor, Vraska, Nissa, I think? But I could be wrong. Anyway, the actual card. So you're searching 33 cards for a card. In green-black. Green-black already has access to most of the good search options, but I think a lot of them are in double-black. It's sorcery speed, but all the search options are. It's a fine card, but I don't know what I'd necessarily include it. Just because it's not a search your entire deck, and I'm always kind of hesitant. So if you're building a combo deck, right, it's not necessarily guaranteed to get you a combo piece. If you're not building a combo deck, what are you searching for on turn 2? Perilous Iteration. Seek a card with mana value 2 or less and a card with mana value 3 or greater. Discard those cards at the beginning of your next turn's end step. So basically, you play it on turn 2. You're not exiling the cards, they're just going to your graveyard. It's perfectly fine. The fact that it's basically, it'll give you a 2-drop. A 2 or 1-drop. In red-green. I like it. I think it's fine. I don't know what I'd replace, but I think it's fine. Alright, Urza's Construction Drone. Fuck, not again! Hey look, Oracle of the Alpha has a friend. When it ETBs, conjure cards named Urza's Mine, Power Plant, and Tower into your library, then shuffle. When it attacks or dies, seek an Urza's Land card. Oh, this is going to be so much fun in... Great. Does this go into a Golos deck? No, it's just lots of mana, and Golos likes colored mana, but it basically gets it because Golos grabs World Tree. And it's guaranteed almost to get you, like, it's probably going to die, right? Like, unless your opponent exiles it, but at which point you already have the 3. Oh, man. How does it do in Historic Brawl? It is perfectly good. Alright, what time is it, by the way? 8:13? Okay, so we'll be able to wrap this up shortly. Oracle of the Alpha was broken mostly because it gave you insane amounts of mana, and then it also gave you Time Warp. I guess, actually, you know what? Everything Oracle of the Alpha gave you was great. How do I feel about this? Concerned. Concerned is a good way to put it. what searches for non-basic lands? So basically, okay, my hunch is that this card is probably broken. I don't know how it is broken. I don't know why it is broken. But having been on the receiving end of Oracle of the Alpha in the last Alchemy set, there's probably some busted stuff you can do with this. To be fair, the Oracle of the Alpha combo did require some other trickery, but if nothing else, it's kind of fun. I'm just having traumatic stress, like flashbacks to 45-minute games where I did nothing for 45 minutes of those games. So I would like to thank all Neombi players for that. But that's the entire set, so as much as I would like to just sit here and waffle, it's time to go outside and run in 20-degree weather, because I'm an idiot. So we're going to go do that. As always, thanks for watching. If you like historic Brawl stuff, please subscribe. I make a lot of historic Brawl content. That is the worst intro ever. I'm just going to go running and freeze to death. Not really, but I will freeze. Until next time, take care, and I'll see you then.